in America, we have there's this impression that we all are kind of on the same footing, right? But there's a lot of areas, and it's typically minority, poor minority, but a big majority is, people of color, black, brown people, where the quality of the water is awful, the quality of the air. I mean, these are things that we feel like we all have a right to. Things are supposed to be free, but there's still a lot of. It's not a coincidence that a lot of these things, if you look at the socioeconomic lines, the racial lines, they tend to impact us more than everyone else, right?
That is the case, and that's the plan, and that is the picture of um, systematic racism that we don't want to turn our eye to and look at the structure of it. In every black city that has been prominent, has been strong and independent, some kind of way the county or the state chose to plow a freeway through it and sweep them out. And every black community that seemed to have provided housing for people to live in a color and to give them low living conditions and high rent is next to a dump yard, is next to a factory. Um, and this is a black issue. This is the reason why we look at why we always, after reports are given, we are the highest risk of, because we've been breeding in. Man, we come from the country, man. We come from woods and grass and hogs out in the yard, and you throw us up on all this smog and stuff, whatever. Yeah, yeah, it would affect your race, and generationally, it would affect your race. It's not a brain surgeon to take to kind of figure out, detect that stuff, whatever. It's a matter of looking at what it is and calling out. It's in the black and white. It's in the plans. It's in the city plans of how you will marginalize, you will make ghettos, you will redline, you will overtax, you will overcharge for insurance. That's how I go, man. It's always been that way. This ain't nothing new, man. Um, Carter G. Woodson was talking about this stuff, man, in early 1900s.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Talk about you talk about the Flint um, residents, your congregation, the stories that you've heard as far as the way that this water has affected people's health, and even before there was a crisis per se, um, this stuff is having long-standing effects, and it's impacting children. And then they, like talk about some of the things that you've learned, and some of the stories that you've heard over the years.
Well, as I mentioned, man, I felt embarrassed, man. As we said before, when you're young, you're ambitious, and you're focusing on how to make a living for yourself, man, and provide and get your grounding, and at that time, you kind of tunnel vision, and so usually you're more sensitive. We come from, man, our eyes open, we ain't walking around the corners, ain't looking, but um, you kind of get in that zone sometime, and that's what happened. So when I actually found out that some of the members have been buying water since the 80s, and they historically found out since the 40s and 50s of how this town came about from it being a logging log like lumber area, and how they traveled on the river and how they started to build factories and then poured toxins into the water. And they was told as kids, you can't fish in the Flint River, don't even play down there by it. And then so over the time you learn the history of it, the water has always been an issue here. Then in the crisis, what we don't acknowledge as a black community is the part we play into it. Then we point the finger at somebody else. The council is black, and we played our part in deciding to vote over agreeing if this concept would take place either. Anyway, brother, you know what I'm saying? We just try to throw it on the governor. He did do what he do. He did use the emergency manager. He did all that. However, among ourselves, we agreed, we shook hands, we toasted and drunk the water and pressed the button when we switched it over to use the Flint water, which we've known historically in Flint has always been bad. And you knew that the proper money wasn't put into the project, and the plant hasn't been updated to the quality of what it should be over years. And we toasted to it. You know what I'm saying? So we let ourselves down outside of again being neglected by government. You know, that's the other side of the story that we don't like take credit for. Leadership, credibility, man, character, principles, all the stuff that get you talked about. you know, so I really I learned the lessons, and then I learned from those outside and the borders of the city as well, because it's not just a black city. It's predominantly black, but you have Hispanics here, you have whites here, you have indigenous people here, you have sacred grounds for Indians, who are against you drilling into their pipes, fix their pipes, because it's holy ground to them. They bear their loved ones there. There's a lot of stuff around it, man, to make you look and feel the compassion for it. And for me, by the grace of God, man, is that coming here, we just missed the mark of moving in the city. We just couldn't find the right house. We was trying to get there. This house was HUD, this house, something, it just didn't work. And we happened to be in suburban area, whatever. So that was all more while your heart was kind of grinched by saying, I got to do something, because I would have been right there in it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so who else gonna speak up when it could have been me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been my position, man. And to hear about the losing of hair, people's skin falling off them, people dying of Legionnaire's disease. I believe I just lost a cousin this year to the effects of the Flint Water Crisis, who suffered about 7 years on a sick bed, man. Just crazy, man, on how many stories you heard. Dogs sick, women going bald. I mean, just horrible stories, man. And that don't make the news, right? Then let's not talk about the children who've been exposed to the lead, and they projecting the news. Well, a generation out, 10 years, 20 years from now, no, people left in the spring and came back to school in the fall, and they went from a A student to an F student. They have the capacity to remember and do it. And the teachers knew the quality of the student and try to advocate for them. It's like, no, something is wrong. And so you throw some money over into a pot and say the money's going to be for them, whatever. But now these kids are 5 years older. They're 6 years older now. That was in what, 14 when that happened.
Yeah.
Right. So not take the whole show up, man, but it's a book. It's a book and a half, man. Yeah. And I'm talking from grassroots, and can nobody tell like I can tell it?
Right. No, and salute to you, Katrina, and the entire church, man, for stepping up to the plate and really embracing the city like your own.